You need a work bestie. That's right. All evidence points to increased satisfaction and happiness at work when you have a work bestie.
So we put on our investigative journalism hats and decided to bring in the best work besties we know.
Tina Fey and Amy Poehler?
Unfortunately, they were not available. No, we are talking to Neal and Toby from the Morning Brew Daily show.
Yes, Neal and Toby are the best examples of a work bestie we could find. They are awesome, and we talk a lot about the insights, the tactics for you to get your own work bestie. Let's get into it. Kaila, I've always been a little nervous to ask you this question.
What?
Are we work besties?
Well, I'm definitely your work bestie.
Wow, savage response. Okay, well,
Of course we're work
that's
besties.
a tough way to start the episode. I'm very excited for this topic on work besties because obviously we are.
Yeah, of course.
Yes.
But first,
Okay.
Kyle, being work besties means that I can be honest with you, right?
Okay, should I be worried?
No. It's just that there's been something on my mind. As a friend, I have to tell you, your slides suck.
Okay. Take it easy, Kaila.
You're spending too much time on presentations that frankly aren't packing a punch. You need to use Gamma. It takes all your messy notes and ideas and transforms them into neat, high-impact slides with just a single click.
You're saying I don't have to format my slides by myself ever again?
Correct. Create professional presentations in minutes, no design skills needed. Start using Gamma for free today at gamma.app/PMLE. That's GAMMA.app/PMLE.
All right, now let's get into it. Neal and Toby, work besties. Thank you for joining per my last email. I know you're in the studio right next door, but we're still tele-remoting you in, so that's quite fun. Thanks for joining.
Good to be here. Coworker pod. Second coworker pod we've done.
There's not enough room in that studio for all the egos
brain
here.
I was going to say, we sit on laps.
I know, there's so many.
We're friends.
Yeah, we can make it work.
Yeah. So we wanted to do an episode on work besties, and we thought you two were pretty much the best example we could think of two work besties. So first, let's start with the origin story of your friendship. How did this beautiful friendship evolve?
It honestly has a very corporate beginning because Neal hired me to work at Morning Brew back in the day as a writer. I went through a full, real Morning Brew interview process. We sat down, I printed my resumes out. Thank God Neal never asked to actually look at my resume. Did a couple of writing assignments, and then, I got the call saying, you're hired, and then it kind of bloomed from there. What do you remember about interviewing me?
I remember that the way you contacted us, which was a cold email to myself, Alex, and Austin, the co-founders of Morning Brew, and it was not a conventional application, that's for sure. You wrote a entire Morning Brew style newsletter called Sports Brew, and you really wanted to, like many of us, wanted to do a Morning Brew for sports, and you actually took the time to write out the newsletter, and you showed your writing chops. And I remember being on the train a little tipsy after a happy hour after work one day, reading the fake newsletter that you sent us, and I was like, this is pretty good, and I don't often think that. So that's when I was like, we should call you in for an interview.
Neal, if you were sober, would you have thought it was good?
Unclear.
Also, I got so lucky too because Neal's a big sports fan, which I didn't even know at the time. So kind of very fortuitous circumstances right there.
It's funny because I feel like when I hear the stories of people applying to Morning Brew by writing a Morning Brew-esque newsletter, the first time I heard it, I was like, oh my God, that's so creative, so original. Then you work here and you realize every single person does that, and you're like, oh, okay, maybe not.
Toby was just the first.
Yeah, you started the trend.
Smart.
You were not the first. You were absolutely not the first, but yours was pretty good.
I formatted it though. I remember that. I remember actually downloading a font identifier extension on Google Chrome.
Wow.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And copying and pasting, make sure I got all the fonts right too, and then also doing all the formatting correctly in like Photoshop. So I did go a little bit above.
It is effective.
Yeah.
I mean, I do, you joke, but I do think a lot of the writers we hired here at Morning Brew did write a mock newsletter in their application or in addition to their application, and it certainly caught my eye.
Yes, I mean, it's the best way to actually identify if they can do the job you're hiring them to do.
That's literally the job, write a newsletter, and you just did.
Yeah.
So I want to ask, so you hire Toby, And then, like in all relationships, that maybe you're on like the 4th or 5th date, and you're like, "Are we taking this to the next level? Is this going to be like a
What is going on?
No, hear me out. Like,
I hear
you go from friend to work bestie. Like, was there a moment where you were like, okay, we're not just colleagues, but we're actually going to be friends? How did that play out?
Well, one thing I remember is, one thing we've not mentioned is that we hired Toby in February 2020. So, we didn't see each other face to face for many months. I didn't see anyone face to face for any months. Maybe our friendship took a step that summer when I did a long cross country road trip during COVID. Yeah, I could just work from any coffee shop with Wi-Fi. So I flew into Detroit, rented a car, and just drove across the West. Turns out Toby has a house in Michigan. And he was like, come on over. And so I drove up after I landed in Detroit, and we hung out for a weekend. We worked the whole time. I think we had like mid-year reviews that so
Neal came to your house to give you a low rating.
Yeah, like we're doing these very intense like Zoom calls during that time. But, that was the first instance where we hung out and he demolished me in golf.
No, and then I also remember we played a lot of golf. We did a lot of work, but then also Neal went water skiing, I think for the first time ever.
Yes,
and that's an image I'll never forget.
Because he was just so amazing.
He was good. I mean, he got up, but like the form could use some work. And I have the pictures stored away somewhere, but those are like good Morning Brew lore is Neal managing editor Neal just, kind of hunched over getting
If
pulled
Neal
down,
ever
but-
tries to run for president, we can pull those
They're
out.
coming out. Yeah.
So once you guys became closer friends, was there ever any point where it was weird? Like as you had to be working together and then you were also friends, like was there any moment where you're like, gosh, I really wish we weren't friends right now?
I'm trying to think. 'Cause yeah, technically Neal was my boss for a long time. And then I did eventually start moving to a different part of the company. So that dynamic was like gone a little bit. But I mean, anyone who's had Neal as a boss, it's very like collaborative. It doesn't feel like he's your boss. It's like you're a thought partner and you're someone that, wants to ideate together. So it never felt too imbalanced like that. And I saw him water skiing, so you can never see him in the same light again. And then I actually did leave the company for a little bit, and we remained friends. So like that's really cemented the friend aspect of it. So I'm trying to. It didn't really answer your question. I'm trying to think of any specific instances. I mean, maybe a missed deadline here or two. Did I ever miss any deadlines or anything like that?
Probably. No, I don't really remember any major friction or anything.
Has it then, on the flip side, do you think that it's helped your work being as close as you are? Like maybe you can be actually more honest because you understand that underneath whatever you say, there's a deep friendship. So maybe you can be more radically candid, so to speak. So has it helped your work, or you think the work would be good even if you weren't as close as you are?
Definitely helped. And I think it's what you spoke to. It's being candid and stuff like that. I think with somebody I wasn't as close with, if we were collaborating on something, I might hesitate to be fully honest with what was going on, or if I didn't think this idea was particularly good. And with Toby, I don't have any hesitation to be like, I don't think that's a good idea. Let's move on. I think it's the same back here. So there's a lot of trust that's built up. And I don't think without, hanging out outside of work or things like that, you just don't build up that rapport and trust. And you probably hold back your opinions to the detriment of the product you're working on.
Yeah. And on the flip side of that too is like, I'm not going to take it personal if Neal doesn't like my idea. Same vice versa. Like, well, there is no like animosity. We'll just move on from it because yeah, it's almost just like brothers in that way. Like you'll say something and then you'll just move on for it because like there is that layer beneath it. And then one other aspect that we haven't touched on yet is that we're both pretty competitive people and we do compete outside of the office a lot, like in sports or, crossword times or anything like that. And I think that aspect gets carried into the studio just a little bit because in our show, we like prep separately and there's always this idea like, oh, what is he going to find that I'm going to find? And so there is like almost a competitive element to it, not in a bad way. It hopefully makes the show a better product. So that's another underrated aspect of being friends with a coworker is if you can bring some of those competitive vibes into the actual workplace.
So who's faster?
In crosswords?
or
in a
sports.
foot race. He takes crosswords. I'll take the foot race.
I wish it was the other way around.
It like started with running. Toby won, and then Neal was like, "We're going to crosswords next." Okay.
He wins those.
So I want to zoom in on the Morning Brew Daily show, and particularly when you were first working together to develop it. Walk us through what that process was like, and then did you ever imagine the show getting as big as it got? It's typically the #1 business podcast on Spotify. I think it's right below Per My Last Email in terms of number of viewers. So walk us through that early process, and then how the show's evolution has that taken you by surprise?
I don't think the show is that much different than what we conceived of. We conceived of a 30-minute rundown of the day's business news, kind of modeled after the Morning Brew newsletter. And we have improved a lot over the years, but the general structure, we've tweaked it here and there. We've added certain segments. We've shortened certain things. We've elongated certain things. We've added little flourishes here and there. And I think overall, we've gotten a lot better over the past 2.5 years. But from what we conceived of till now, the basic DNA is the same.
Yeah, and I actually think that in developing a show, you will try a fair amount of things, and it's very clear which ones are going to stick because they just stick effortlessly. I mean, one of the examples is when we were conceiving of the show, I said, "Let's ride" one day for really it was actually, I'll tell you the reason. It was when Russell Wilson had signed for the Broncos way back when. He had this really cringy video where he's like, "Broncos Nation, let's ride." And I said it just on air almost as a joke. And then we're like, wait, that's kind of good. And now it's become a catchphrase. And I do think in any product development, it's just going to be so clear what has the streamlined ability to just fit into the show. I mean, Neal had an idea a year ago to say like, hey, I'd love to fit some more headlines at the end of the show, not necessarily full news stories, but just quick hits. And as soon as he said that, we did it the next day and it just fit really well. So now it's become part of the show. And then the idea is sometimes they don't stick and they just fall to the wayside, and it's just kind of the nature of things. So even though the core DNA has stayed the same, as we've added stuff, it's just been so clear what is actually going to have staying power and what, you should forget.
And then in terms of like, did we think this would be the biggest podcast?
Yes.
I mean, I think we both, I don't know if it was explicit, but I think we're both competitive and we have a few rivals out there in the marketplace, and we looked at their stuff and we're like, we want to beat them.
Yeah.
And that was kind of a big motivating factor. But at the same time, I learned from doing the Morning Brew newsletter every day for the past however many years, like you can have this big North Star in the distance, but what you really have to focus on is just making a good product day in, day out, and just lock in, and it'll grow that way. And if you make it really good, people will share it and it'll grow and it'll grow and it'll grow. So that's mostly what I've been focused on, is just create a really good show every single day. And then the outcome will, it will lead to the outcomes that you want if you just kind of make a good show every single morning.
We've been talking about work besties. The next time we have you on, we'll talk about work nemesis, because I think those are also great. Love having rivals. But you guys don't talk about this often, but you were actually roommates for a period of time.
Yeah, you took work besties to the next level.
How was that with getting up at 4 a.m., going to work together, having the morning podcast, and then working all day and then going home? Like, were you guys sick of each other? How was it?
Let me set the stage here, though, because a lot of factors came together that ended with us living together. One, Neal's roommate had just moved out. My lease had ended right at the same time. We're on the same sleep schedule.
Yeah.
Neal was just going to essentially live there by himself, and so it would have just been an increase in rent. And so a lot of stars aligned. I moved in. It was totally fine, actually. Like we have slightly different schedules, even though we are on the exact same schedule, where Neal likes to go home a little bit earlier than me, lock in, sit at his desk, put his noise-canceling headphones on. I usually stayed in the office for a little longer just because I'm not very good at working from home. And so with that, we were almost on, like, I'd come home at like 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. He would have been home. He has his own friends. I have my own friends. And then in the mornings, it's super easy. We just share a ride into work. Weirdly enough, we have this deal with Octopus that shows our content in the back of Ubers, and sometimes in the morning we'd get into an Uber together, see our own faces staring back at us at 4 a.m., and that's where it gets a little freaky. But yeah, for the most part, totally fine, I would say.
My favorite part about it was there were a few instances, maybe once a week, where it would be 7 p.m. and Toby would just be like, "I think I'm out for the night."
It would be 5 p.m.
Yeah, 5. He's like, "I think it's a 7 p.m. bedtime, 6:30," and would just go into his room, lock the door, and you wouldn't see him till the next day because of a lack of sleep.
And then one time I had my mom come and visit us, and it was a day that we had to prep for the show. And she's like, "You guys don't understand, but when you're talking about the show, it sounds like a completely different language because we'll just say one word, but since we both have the shared context of like our Slack channel," she's like, "Listening to you guys talk about it sounds like an alien language because no one has any idea what you're saying, but you guys understand what you're saying," which is just, a byproduct of being work besties, living together, spending a lot of time together. So we have like a secret language, even though we're not even aware of it.
It's like twins, how they can communicate telepathically.
Exactly.
You just say hair and makeup and you two both laugh and everyone else is like, what does that even mean?
We activate, yeah.
And we'll be right back after this. Okay, back to the show.
So for people listening to the podcast who maybe have trepidation or hesitation around forming as close of a relationship that you and Toby and Neal have with someone at their work. And we've covered this topic in previous episodes, and there is a sense that people want to keep their work and their life separate. And so the idea of having a work bestie is a little scary to them. It's this blending of boundaries that maybe they're not super comfortable with. But all of the statistics show that having a work bestie increases job satisfaction, increases your ability to recommend other people to your company. It seems like a very good thing. What advice would you have or words of wisdom would you have for someone who is a little on the fence about trying to have a work bestie?
I mean, I think just let nature take its course. If you were going to be friends with that person outside of work and they just so happen to be your coworker, I wouldn't necessarily fight that urge because, when Neal and I weren't coworkers, we were still friends. So I think if it's meant to be, it's meant to be, and you shouldn't necessarily fight it just because, you are employed by the same company.
Well, I'd like to hear your guys' take because you're the experts here. If you don't identify an obvious work bestie in your core group of people that you work with, is that something that you should actively take steps to find and be more, I guess the word is aggressive and, asking colleagues out to get coffee and just, what do you guys think?
I'm pretty aggressive about my belief that not even a work best friend, but like having friends at work dramatically changes your experience, and you're there for at least 8 hours a day. Mm-hmm. Like if you don't have any friends or any colleagues that you're friendly with, you're going to be miserable. Mm-hmm. And so, there's a few times where I found like a vacuum where maybe my closest friend left the company or I'm just not feeling like as close with some of my colleagues, where I will like identify somebody that I really like as a colleague and take active steps to become closer with them. And sometimes like if I take it too far, if anyone takes it too far, obviously it becomes creepy. Don't do that. But like, oh, I really like this person. We just had a meeting. Like, well, I'll just linger by their desk and be like, hey, what's up? And see if there's anything else. Like maybe we get a coffee. Mm-hmm. And that has dramatically changed my work satisfaction. But I don't know, Kyle, do you agree? Yeah,
I think I do agree. And I got to give kudos to Neal for doing the most classic journalist bait and switch on us. Yeah, unbelievable. I would say that most people, I think, have the capacity to be friends if you spend enough time with them. And particularly at work, to Kayla's point, you're spending so much time with these people that I do think just naturally you will find a friend or find a work bestie. I do also think, going to the happy hours, asking people out for coffee, getting to know them more, even if they don't become a best friend, will help your working relationship. If you do all of that and you still don't have a friend at work, it's probably not the right culture fit. Because at Morning Brew, at least, like I feel like we all have so many friends here because the people that work here are just like awesome. So
cool.
I think that it's a
culture
fit situation, though.
Yeah.
I think if we surveyed 1,000 people, 900 would say something different.
I want to ask you about that, Neal and Toby, because I do think Morning Brew has a really unique culture. Like, if you've had work experiences outside of Morning Brew, have you found it as easy to make a work bestie there, or is this to your point, Neal, a unique Morning Brew trait.
Well, Kyle, I want to throw it back to you. So,
We're gonna do a journalism
It's ping
duel.
pong, yeah.
No, I am maybe not a good person to answer this question. I've been at Morning Brew since 2017.
The OG.
So I have had a few other work experiences, and maybe people weren't as tight knit as they are here, at least in our content crew at Morning Brew. But yeah, I had friends at those workplaces as well, so it wasn't a complete, it wasn't black and white.
And Neal,
for me, exactly.
Neal, since you've been here so long, I imagine in the early days when there's 5, 10 people at the company, it's much easier to be closer to your colleagues. You've seen it grow to 215, 220 some employees now. How has your view on forming work friendships changed over the tenure of your time at Morning Brew?
Wow. Yes, you were right. It was very easy to be close with people in a startup environment. That could also cut both ways, that if you kind of bang up against the people that you are working with for so many hours and there's only 4 of them, that I could see how those things could collapse. But if you do like them and are friends with them, then, it could be extremely productive. I think in some ways that could also, I'm just going back and forth, but I think in also some ways that could be a negative because it promotes groupthink and finding people within the same network. And that is something that I would say, struggled with early on in Morning Brew. It was me. I went to the University of Maryland. Tyler went to the University of Maryland in a frat. Mike Schwartz went to the University of Maryland in a frat. Then Alex and Austin, University of Michigan in a frat. So
University of M frat.
Yeah. U of M frats.
You'll never guess what our logo was. It was a mug with a suit and a tie. So that's what Morning Brew was back then, and we realized that it was a particular type of culture that we needed to change, and we did that, I think, successfully as we grew from 10 to 20 to 30 people. And yeah, I guess from a perspective of the fact that we're like 250 people now, I think I really see the power of having HR, I guess, in creating spaces for people to hang out where they normally wouldn't, and promoting cross-team collaboration, because I think it's very easy to just hang out or work with the people in your particular silo, and you would never ever meet somebody on the sales team or on the growth marketing team or on the other side of the business without forced fun. And when we do have field days and mixers and things like that, you kind of just, if you do go, and I know it might sound cringy, you end up having a good time and meeting people from other parts of the company.
That's a great answer. Shout out to our friends at HR. I went to a University of Minnesota, but I was not at a frat, so it took me a while to get to Morning Brew.
So I was the outlier. That was the GDI.
So I want to pivot to some questions we got from your team, the Morning Brew Daily team, and throw them at you. Okay. So first question, they wanted to know, for the jobs you have outside of the podcast, because you both do a lot around here, what's one thing you admire about the other person that isn't related to the podcast, but to something else they do at Morning Brew?
Is this about Neal's job outside the podcast?
Correct.
Yeah.
Well, I'm in the unique place of having been on Neal's team technically before the podcast existed. And I always just thought you were a really good editor, because it's not easy to be a great editor. As someone who has gone on to edit some content myself, Neal just always seemed to be able to give you feedback without you feeling horrible about it, which is, I mean, that's the whole point of being an editor, is that you don't want to be too harsh. You don't want to be too easy. You want the product to be better, especially remotely too, because like I was a remote employee. So having to convey that sense of, hey, we want you to be better, but like not make you feel bad, that's a really fine line to walk. And really, you're just like a fantastic editor at your craft, and you didn't start out as an editor. I think that's something you developed over time. So yeah, that's one thing I admire.
And I would say for Toby, who has done a lot of social media stuff here, it's not going with what was considered the industry's best practices. And he always brought like a maverick mentality when he came in, and it was like, why are people all putting hashtags in their Twitter things? Like, that's terrible. We're not doing that. People are also distributing their links and their articles across Twitter. Like, that is stupid. We're not going to do that. So he's always kind of brushed up against what the conventional wisdom has been and has been right for most of the time. And he, one, I think, message that he brought was there's no substitute for just kind of marinating in Twitter. Like, to do your job well, you just have to be on Twitter a lot.
Yeah.
And I think that has proved out to be true from the best people who have done social media here, just kind of live on and are native to the platforms that they work on. And another really cool thing that Toby did that I still have on my profile is when he came to Morning Brew, he's like, everybody should have a coffee mug emoji attached to their Twitter name.
I still have that too.
Yeah.
And as a way of just like branding the company on social media and the individuals who work there. And I saw that adopted a lot across many other companies as well. So that was a really cool
Technically,
idea.
Twitter or X now took the idea because now you can like be a part of a verified organization. So
Yeah.
someone's out there was watching.
Before we get to the next question, the Twitter story reminded me when I was applying for a job at Morning Brew, I legitimately thought you all would not hire me if I didn't have a Twitter. So I made a Twitter right before applying just to be like, no, trust me, I'm like on the platform.
I got it.
It felt like Morning Brew was like dominating Twitter, and I would always see the coffee emoji. So, Toby, thanks for bringing your Maverick mentality to the company.
And thanks for starting a Twitter account. We, in fact, would not have hired now.
So the second one is, would you please, again, these are questions from your teammates on the Morning Brew Daily Show.
So this is our producers and
Yeah.
okay.
Rank the team from least to most favorite.
Well, here's the thing. We have 2 Olivias on the team.
Yeah.
So if we just say Olivia,
Yeah,
we
I
don't
like Olivia.
I love
One
Olivia.
Olivia's the
great.
top,
Yeah.
one Olivia's the bottom. You won't say which one is
Yes,
which.
Olivia's great. Olivia stinks.
There's no way we could possibly do that because everyone plays such a critical role and they each do very different things but work seamlessly together and talk about spending a lot of time with people at work. I mean, we're in here every day at 5 a.m. all together, and it's a great team to be a part
Yeah,
of.
I wish just people knew that there is just a big, because there's just the 2 of us. You just hear us yapping all the time, and then you just hear the names at the end of the credits. But I wish people knew all the work that went into, just coordinating the stuff that you wouldn't even think about, like getting the ads in the right place, making sure we have the right talking points, the graphics that you see on YouTube, all this stuff, all the clips that go up on social media. Like, that's not us. We're not doing any of that. So we just turned this into a love fest for the team, but that's what it should be, okay?
Yeah.
We don't like that question. That's a crap question.
I think that's what they wanted.
It came from the team.
What they wanted.
I do like your mathematical analysis, though, that there were 2 Olivias.
Yes.
So saying
Yeah.
that would
That's easy.
piss off the least amount of people.
Yeah.
The last question we had from your team is, what do you still get nervous about when you go to record?
It is remarkable how less nervous we are now than when we started. And you can just, sometimes I go back and watch, which I don't know why I do this, the early ones. It literally looks like we're hostages. Like someone's forcing us to be there. Our like voices are shaking. We're so like timid with each other. But now the only thing that I do get nervous about is if there's a story that I don't feel like I have a full grasp around, like whether if it's like a particularly polarizing issue or if it's just a story that is very technical in nature. That's where you have a little bit of nerves, because I liken doing the show to, you have to study for a oral presentation and then give that oral presentation every single day. So anyone who's ever given an oral presentation, you have a little bit of those doubts, like of course some nerves pop up, but I would say those instances are fewer and further between, because we can prep better, we're more comfortable in here. But yeah, that's the only time when like the heart rate gets raised a little bit.
I agree. Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say.
There's actually,
Well, like a lack of preparation. If you're not fully
Yeah.
prepared, that's when you can stumble.
Yep.
So you really have to know your stuff inside and out.
the only other time I would say too is every once in a while Neal will like hit a reference to me and like I missed it. Like the one I'm thinking about is like we were doing a story about Paris and he goes like, what would Emily think? And when he said that, I didn't make the connection between Emily and Paris, like the Netflix show, and that. I thought he was talking about Emily Milliron, our producer. And so on air, I'm just like, what? Like, what do you? And I remember getting nervous. I'm like, what is he talking about? Who's Emily? Why is she related to it? So that's why you got to
funny.
stay on your toes there. Yeah.
Amazing. So finally, we have a game. that we'd like to play with you. We're going to call it Work Besties or Codependent. And so we have 3 scenarios, and you guys are going to tell us if this is normal work bestie behavior or if it's crossing the line a little bit into codependent work friends. So first one, you were offered a raise, and you ask your manager if your work bestie got offered one too.
Oh, I know what the correct answer is. Like, you probably shouldn't cross that line. Like, those should remain separate. So what do we answer here? Codependencies or
work bestie or codependent?
That makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah, because it feels like it's crossing. That's not like you could talk to your work bestie and be like, "Yo, did you get also?"
Yeah, I don't think you need to ask the manager.
Don't need to ask your manager.
You just talk to them. Okay, you get invited to a happy hour by colleagues from another team, just you, and you extend said invite to your work bestie. Is that cool, or is that like codependent? Can you guys not always hang out all the time?
This is just like general social dynamics you're asking about. You could rip this outside of work and be like, is it normal to invite a friend to a gathering that they weren't invited to? And no one has solved that. It leads to a ton of group chat conversations and phone calls and a lot of hand wringing.
Here's the deal, though. I do think those are different because outside of work, that would be a little weird. Like, you just show up with someone that no one else knew. But within a work setting, you work at the same company, so there's automatically like some shared interest.
Okay.
So I think it's totally fine in work. You might have to go through a couple more hoops outside of work.
So now we know Neal is not inviting Toby, but Toby is inviting Neal.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, last one. You go to lunch and you ask your work bestie if they are getting lunch today too.
Yeah, that's nice.
Isn't that
you should
most
always
normal
do that.
thing?
Yeah.
It does feel pretty normal.
That's work bestie.
Yeah.
That's not
I
even
think
work
that's work
bestie.
colleague.
That's like
Yeah.
work acquaintance.
That might even be enemy.
Right.
You never know.
Yeah, draw them out so they're at least productive.
There are some people who, whenever they leave the office, they do say, "Hey, I'm going here. Does anyone want X?" And I've never been one of those people. Like, usually you just go. But I do admire the people who go, "Hey, I'm getting a coffee right now. Who wants a coffee?" So yeah, maybe I need to work on my work bestie behavior because I'm not extending the invite as much as I should.
Those people are like the champions of the workplace.
You are probably one of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe. I don't know. Maybe less now.
I mean,
feel
today
like
you're like, I'm about to record a pod. You want to do a pod with us? And we're like, yeah, absolutely. We'll do that.
Fair enough. Okay, I want to wrap it up here and just say, one, again, we had done an episode in the past about this topic, and I do think there's a lot of, again, hesitation around being really close with people at work for some valid reasons. But Neal and Toby, I think you are honestly like a inspirational example of blending both work and friendship in a really positive way that strengthened both the work product, but also allowed you to become closer friends. And so for people who want to form a work bestie relationship, I can't think of a better example than you two. And we really appreciate you coming on, sharing a little behind the scenes of both the work and the friendship, and just really appreciate both of you.
Yeah, and so if for some reason people are listening to us and don't know about Morning Brew Daily show, go check that out. It's the #1 business podcast. Thank you guys so much for coming, and we'll talk to you all later.
We'll see you in the work.
Get some lunch.
Right outside.
See you in 30 seconds.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thank you.
It was fun.
Our producer is Michaela Heck.
Our technical director is Uchenna Ogu.
And our president is Devin Emery.
This show is a production of Morning Brew.
And enjoy your work bestie, y'all.